She's a failure. My sister mocked my Navy uniform, until her Navy SEAL fiancé dropped his glass and saluted me. My family always said there were two Miller daughters. One was born to make the family proud. The other was born to embarrass them. For years, I let them believe that. I let them laugh when they called me the family's biggest disappointment. I let them whisper that I had thrown my future away. I even smiled when they introduced me as the daughter who never lived up to her potential. What they never realized was that some of the most important jobs in the world don't come with applause. Some of them come with silence. Some of them come with secrets. And sometimes, the people who think you're the smallest person in the room are standing in front of someone whose name they were never supposed to know. My name is Sarah Miller, and this is the story of the night my family finally discovered who I really was. Growing up in Boston, it didn't take long for me to understand my place in the Miller family. My older sister, Chloe, was the golden child. She was beautiful, confident, effortlessly charming, and somehow always knew exactly what people wanted to hear. Teachers adored her. Neighbors bragged about knowing her. My parents treated every achievement she made like it deserved its own holiday. When Chloe won a debate competition, my father rented out a restaurant to celebrate. When she got accepted into an Ivy League university, my mother mailed copies of her acceptance letter to practically every relative we had. Family gatherings somehow always became conversations about Chloe's bright future. Meanwhile, I usually sat quietly at the end of the table, listening. I wasn't jealous. Not really. I just wished someone would ask how I was doing. I was a different kind of person. While Chloe loved expensive dresses, I preferred hiking boots. She dreamed about charity galas and luxury vacations. I dreamed about aircraft carriers, helicopters, and oceans that stretched farther than the eye could see. Even as a little girl, I loved stories about service. Whenever my classmates wanted to become movie stars or CEOs, I found myself reading books about military history, rescue missions, and people who risked everything for complete strangers. I couldn't explain it. I just knew that I wanted my life to mean something. One afternoon, when I was 16, I told my family during dinner that I had been thinking about joining the military after graduation. The room went completely silent. Then Chloe laughed. Not a polite laugh. The kind of laugh someone gives when they honestly believe you've just told the funniest joke they've ever heard. You, she said, wiping away imaginary tears. You're serious? I am. My father put down his fork. Sarah, smart girls don't join the military. My mother nodded immediately. Sweetheart, you have so much potential. Why would you throw your life away? I wouldn't be throwing it away. No. Chloe leaned back in her chair. You'll spend years taking orders while everyone else builds successful careers. I'd be serving my country. She rolled her eyes. Or you could serve yourself for once. Nobody defended me. Not one person. That night, I realized something that would shape the rest of my life. My family measured success by titles, neighborhoods, and bank accounts. I measured it by purpose. Those two things rarely point in the same direction. The months after graduation only made the divide between us even wider. Chloe received acceptance letters from prestigious universities. My parents framed them before she'd even packed her bags. Every visitor who came to our house was given a tour that somehow ended in front of those framed letters. This is Chloe's future, my mother would say proudly. Nobody ever asked about mine. Which was fine. Because I had already made my decision. A week after my 18th birthday, I quietly walked into a recruiting office. The building wasn't impressive. No marble floors. No crystal chandeliers. No expensive artwork hanging on the walls. Just a flag, a few desks, and people who believed in something larger than themselves. The recruiter looked at me and smiled. So, what brings you here today? I want to enlist in the United States Navy. He studied me for a second. That's a big decision. I know. Family supportive? I hesitated. Not exactly. He nodded like he'd heard that answer hundreds of times before. Sometimes the people closest to us don't understand the road we're meant to take. That sentence stayed with me. A few weeks later, I left Boston carrying one duffel bag and more uncertainty than confidence. My parents didn't drive me to the airport. My father claimed he had meetings. My mother said airports made her emotional. Chloe barely looked up from her phone. Before I walked out the front door, she called after me. "Don't worry, Sarah." I turned around. "When this doesn't work out, we'll still let you sleep in the guest room." She smiled as if she'd said something generous. I smiled back. "Thanks." Then I walked away. I didn't know it at the time, but that would be the last moment I spent worrying about proving myself to my family. Boot camp erased that part of me. Nothing about it was easy. The morning started long before sunrise. Every muscle in my body hurt. My hands blistered. My feet ached. There were days when exhaustion became so overwhelming that even lifting my arms felt impossible. People often imagine military training as non-stop action and explosions. The reality is different. It's repetition, discipline, attention to detail. Doing the right thing over and over until it becomes instinct. The instructors didn't care where you came from. They didn't care how wealthy your parents were. They didn't care what schools your family attended. Out there, everyone earned respect the same way. By showing up. By working harder than yesterday. By refusing to quit. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being compared to Chloe. I was only competing against the woman I had been the day before. And somehow, that felt incredibly freeing. The first letter I received from home arrived nearly 2 months later. It wasn't from my father. It wasn't from my mother. It was from Chloe. Inside was a single folded card. "No, I miss you. No, I hope you're okay." Just one sentence written across the middle. "Still playing soldier?" I stared at those 3 words for a long time. Then I folded the card back up, slipped it into my locker, and went back to training. Not because her words didn't hurt. They did. But every insult she threw at me became another reason to keep going. Every mile I ran. Every obstacle I climbed. Every freezing morning I pushed through. I silently promised myself the same thing. One day, I'd become someone no one could ignore. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted to earn it. Months turned into years. Assignments became deployments. Training became responsibility. Responsibility became leadership. Little by little, doors began opening that I never imagined were possible. My evaluations kept improving. Senior officers started remembering my name. I was trusted with missions that demanded precision, calm judgment, and absolute discretion. Then one afternoon, after returning from a deployment, I was called into a secure briefing room. Waiting inside were officers I had never met before. One of them slid a thin classified folder across the table. "Commander Miller," he said, "we'd like to discuss an opportunity." I looked down at the folder. I had no idea that opening it would change not only my career, but eventually expose the biggest secret I had ever kept from my own family. I stared at the classified folder for a moment before opening it. Inside were only a handful of pages. No dramatic introductions. No glowing praise. Just a concise summary of my service record, followed by one sentence that immediately caught my attention. "Selection recommended for Special Operations Tactical Planning Program." I looked back up at the senior officers sitting across from me. One of them folded his hands together. Commander Miller, everything discussed in this room remains classified. If you accept this assignment, much of your work will never appear in public records. You won't be able to explain your schedule to friends. You won't be able to tell your family where you are. There will be missions that no one outside this room will ever know existed. I didn't even need a minute to think. I accept. The officer gave a slight nod. I thought you might. That decision changed everything. From that day forward, my life became divided into two worlds. There was the world everyone could see. And there was the world I could never talk about. The visible world was ordinary. If someone asked what I did, I gave vague answers. I work on planning. I've been busy. I've been assigned to another base. Those answers were true. They just weren't the whole truth. The hidden world was something else entirely. Long nights inside secure operations centers. Walls covered in digital maps. Live satellite feeds. Intelligence briefings that stretched until sunrise. Teams of analysts, pilots, intelligence officers, and special operations personnel working together to solve impossible problems before someone else's son or daughter stepped onto dangerous ground. Contrary to what movies show, the most important battles often happen long before the first helicopter leaves the ground. Every route. Every extraction point. Every backup plan. Every weather report. Every communication channel. Someone has to think through all of it. That became my job. One mistake on paper could cost lives thousands of miles away. There was no room for ego. Only responsibility. Months blended into years. I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. I spent more Christmas mornings on military bases than I did around my family's dining table. Oddly enough, I preferred it. The people beside me never cared about my last name. They didn't ask whether my sister went to an Ivy League school. They didn't care what neighborhood I'd grown up in. They cared whether I could do my job. And every single day, I worked to make sure I never let them down. Every successful operation reminded me why I'd chosen this life. Not because anyone would ever applaud. But because somewhere, another family would receive a phone call saying their loved one was coming home safely. That was enough. Whenever I returned to Boston to visit my family, nothing had changed. If anything, things had gotten worse. Chloe had become exactly the woman everyone predicted she would become. She moved comfortably through charity galas, luxury hotels, and exclusive country clubs as though she'd been born for them. She always wore designer labels. Always knew the most influential people in every room. Always had another story about someone's private yacht or another invitation to an exclusive event. My parents couldn't have been prouder. Every conversation somehow circled back to Chloe's achievements. Did you hear about Chloe's promotion? Did you see the vacation Chloe just took? Her investment portfolio is doing incredibly well. And she's dating someone very important. Then someone would eventually remember I was sitting there. So, Sarah. My mother would smile politely. Still in the Navy? Yes. Doing, what exactly? I work with planning. She'd nod as though she'd expected such an unremarkable answer. Oh. That one little word carried an entire conversation inside it. Oh. Nothing impressive. Oh. Still doing that. Oh. Maybe someday you'll find something better. I never corrected her. There wasn't any point. Even if I explained what I actually did, I couldn't explain enough for them to understand. So I simply smiled. Everything's going well. That seemed to satisfy them. One Thanksgiving, Chloe decided to entertain the entire table. She raised her wine glass dramatically. I have a question. Everyone looked at her. What exactly does Sarah do all day? I shrugged. My job. She laughed. I know that. No, seriously. She looked around the table. Does anyone here actually know what she does? Nobody answered. Even my father chuckled. I've wondered that myself. Chloe leaned toward me with a playful smile that wasn't playful at all. Come on, Sarah. Give us something. Are you driving ships? Scrubbing decks? Filing paperwork? The table laughed. I took another bite of dinner. I can't really discuss work. She clapped her hands sarcastically. There it is. The top secret deck cleaning mission. Even my mother laughed. Oh, Chloe. But she wasn't telling her to stop. She was enjoying it. I set my fork down. There are confidentiality rules. Chloe rolled her eyes. Sure there are. If your job were actually important, we'd probably know about it. I looked at her calmly. Not necessarily. She smirked. Whatever helps you sleep at night. The conversation moved on. Mine didn't. Driving back to base the next morning, I thought about how strange life could be. Thousands of people trusted me with classified operations. Yet my own family trusted me with absolutely nothing. Somehow. That no longer hurt. It simply became reality. A few months later, I found myself sitting inside another secure operations center. A rescue mission had gone wrong overseas. An elite team was trapped behind enemy lines after intelligence unexpectedly changed. Time wasn't measured in hours anymore. It was measured in minutes. Every decision mattered. Maps covered every screen. Radio traffic filled the room. Weather reports updated continuously. The commanding officer looked toward me. What are you thinking, Commander? I studied the terrain one more time. Then something clicked. There. Several heads turned. The enemy expects them to move south. I pointed toward another route. They'll be watching every obvious exit. What if we stop trying to escape through the valley? And bring the extraction team in from the ridge? Silence. People started checking the maps again. One intelligence officer slowly nodded. That could work. Another added. They'd never expect aircraft to approach from that angle. Within minutes, the plan changed. Hours later, the operation succeeded. Every member of the team came home alive. No celebrations. No press conference. No interviews. Just another classified mission added to a list that officially didn't exist. I didn't know the names of every operator on that mission. Most of them never met me. That's how it was supposed to be. Weeks later, however, a brief report crossed my desk. One name caught my attention. Lieutenant Austin Carter. Navy SEAL. Mission completed successfully. At the time, he was simply another name among many. I had no idea fate was quietly placing us on a collision course. Because less than a year later, that same Navy SEAL would walk into my family's annual summer gala. Not as a fellow officer. Not as someone reporting for duty. But as the man my sister planned to marry. And neither of them had the slightest idea who I really was. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was the kind of envelope my mother loved. Heavy cream-colored paper. Gold lettering. Our family name embossed across the front as if we belonged to royalty instead of a family that could barely survive one dinner without criticizing each other. I opened it during my lunch break. The Miller Summer Gala. Every year my parents hosted the event at a luxury estate overlooking the Rhode Island coastline. Business executives, politicians, investors, attorneys, and anyone who considered themselves part of Boston's high society would be there. Normally, I found an excuse not to attend. A deployment. Training. Duty. Anything. This year, however, my mother had already called 3 times before the invitation even reached me. You have to come, Sarah. I'll try. No, she corrected sharply. Not try. You're coming. Why is this one so important? There was a brief pause before her voice became noticeably more excited. Because Chloe is introducing her fiancé to everyone. Oh. You've heard of him. I doubt it. His name is Austin Carter. I froze for just a fraction of a second. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. But military records passed across my desk every week. Thousands of names blurred together over time. I'm sure you'll like him, my mother continued. He's a Navy SEAL. I smiled to myself. Really? Finally, someone in this family has a military career worth talking about. The sentence stung more than I expected. So, you'll be there? I'll be there. Wonderful. And Sarah? Yes? Please don't wear your uniform. I already knew where this was going. We've arranged a black tie evening. I understand. I bought you a beautiful designer gown. Mom. No arguments. I'll do my best. Not your best. She sighed dramatically. Just, please don't embarrass your sister. The call ended. I stared at my phone for several seconds. Embarrass my sister. It amazed me how those words always found their way into conversations. Not once had my mother asked how I was doing. Not once had she asked whether I had recently returned safely from deployment. Only whether I might somehow embarrass Chloe. A week passed quickly. The morning of the gala began like every other duty day. Except it didn't stay ordinary for long. Just after sunrise, my secure phone rang. Commander Miller. We need you at headquarters. I'm on my way. The briefing lasted much longer than anyone expected. A rapidly developing overseas situation required immediate operational planning. Multiple departments were involved. Maps covered the walls. Intelligence officers moved in and out of the room carrying updated reports. Every 30 minutes another piece of information changed. Nobody was watching the clock. Until I finally glanced at mine. 6:42. The gala. I had completely forgotten. One of the officers noticed. You need to be somewhere. My family's expecting me. He smiled. Families have terrible timing. You have no idea. The meeting finally ended just after 7. There wasn't enough time to drive home, change into formal clothes, and make it to Rhode Island. I looked down at my reflection in the hallway mirror. My navy dress uniform was perfectly pressed. Every ribbon sat exactly where it belonged. Every insignia had been inspected before sunrise. There was nothing inappropriate about it. Except, my family hated seeing me wear it. For a moment, I considered skipping the gala entirely. That would have been easier. No awkward conversations. No judgment. No pretending. Then I remembered my mother's words. You're coming. Fine. I'd come. Just not the way she wanted. The Rhode Island estate looked like something from a magazine. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Valets hurried from vehicle to vehicle. String lights illuminated perfectly trimmed gardens. Soft music drifted through the evening air. Guests in expensive tuxedos and designer gowns laughed beneath crystal chandeliers visible through enormous ballroom windows. As I stepped out of my car, several people looked in my direction. Most smiled politely. A few looked confused. Military uniforms weren't exactly common at events like this. I adjusted my cap beneath my arm and walked toward the entrance. Inside, the ballroom sparkled. Crystal glasses. Fresh flowers. A live orchestra. Everything looked flawless. Which meant I stood out immediately. The conversations didn't stop. But they changed. Whispers replaced laughter. People glanced toward me before quietly speaking to the person beside them. I'd experienced that look before. Some were curious. Some were respectful. Others simply assumed I was part of the event's security detail. None of it bothered me. I signed the guest book and stepped farther inside. Almost instantly, I heard my name. Sarah. I looked up. Chloe. She stood near the center of the ballroom wearing a stunning white designer gown that probably cost more than my first car. Several guests surrounded her. She was smiling. Until she noticed what I was wearing. The smile disappeared. Her expression hardened into complete disbelief. She excused herself from the group and walked directly toward me, champagne glass in hand. Each step looked more irritated than the last. When she finally stopped in front of me, she looked me up and down slowly. Oh, my God. She laughed quietly. You actually did it. I remained calm. Good evening, Chloe. What happened to the dress? I came straight from work. She stared at me as though I'd confessed to committing a crime. You couldn't stop somewhere? I didn't have time. No. She shook her head. You made time. You just chose not to. Nearby conversations began slowing. People sensed entertainment. What exactly are you thinking? She asked loudly. This is a formal gala. It is. So why are you dressed like? She waved her hand toward my uniform. That? My briefing ran late. She laughed again. Your briefing. Several nearby guests smiled awkwardly. I could already feel eyes turning toward us. I told you I'd do my best. And this is your best? She took another slow look at my uniform. You look like a glorified security guard. A few uncomfortable chuckles echoed nearby. You seriously walked into a room full of executives dressed for work? It's my dress uniform. It's a costume. Her voice became louder. You were specifically told to wear something elegant. I didn't have time to change. No. You wanted attention. I didn't answer. She stepped even closer. You've always done this. Whenever something important happens for me, you somehow manage to make yourself the center of attention. I blinked once. I wasn't trying to. She scoffed. Please. My mother suddenly appeared beside us. At first she smiled. Then she noticed the uniform. The smile vanished. Sarah. She closed her eyes briefly. Tell me this is temporary. I came directly from base. You couldn't stop at a hotel? There wasn't enough time. She looked genuinely embarrassed. Sweetheart. This is Chloe's night. I know. Then why would you do this? I'm here because you insisted. Not like this. She lowered her voice. Please. Go change. I can't. Then maybe. She hesitated before saying the words. Maybe you should head home. For a split second. That hurt. Not because I wanted to stay. But because hearing your own mother ask you to leave never becomes easier. I stood perfectly still. This uniform represents my service. My mother sighed. That's not the point. No. Chloe interrupted. The point is she doesn't understand class. She suddenly raised her champagne glass toward several nearby guests. Ladies and gentlemen. I immediately knew this wasn't going anywhere good. My little sister has always dreamed much smaller than the rest of us. More people turned. Some smiled politely. Others looked uncomfortable. Chloe continued anyway. While our family built businesses, Sarah chose to spend her life cleaning ships. Laughter broke out from one corner of the room. Someone whispered something I couldn't hear. Another person shook their head sympathetically. Chloe smiled wider. She's basically a low-level sailor. And somehow she thought this was appropriate attire. My mother didn't stop her. Not once. Instead, she simply stood there looking embarrassed. Embarrassed by me. I kept my face completely expressionless. Years in uniform teach you something valuable. Emotion is a choice. Discipline is stronger. Chloe. My voice remained calm. This uniform isn't a joke. She rolled her eyes dramatically. No. Your career is. Then she turned toward the ballroom. My sister wants everyone to think she's important. The truth? She probably spends her days getting yelled at and scrubbing decks. A few people laughed again. The words echoed across the silent ballroom. I could have corrected her. I could have told everyone exactly who I was. Exactly what I did. Exactly why I couldn't discuss my assignments. Instead, I said nothing. Because I didn't need to. Sometimes, the truth has perfect timing. And less than 30 seconds later, it walked through the ballroom doors. The ballroom doors opened quietly. At first, almost no one noticed. The orchestra continued playing. Conversations slowly picked back up after Chloe's little performance. She stood there wearing the satisfied smile of someone who believed she'd just won. Then I saw him. Tall. Broad shoulders. Perfect posture. A tailored black tuxedo that couldn't quite hide the bearing of a career military officer. Lieutenant Austin Carter. Even out of uniform, there were certain habits you never lost. The way he scanned every room before fully entering it. The measured pace of his walk. The calm awareness in his eyes. I'd seen that look on countless operators. It wasn't something you could fake. Chloe's face lit up. Austin. She hurried across the ballroom and wrapped her arms around him. There you are. He smiled politely. Sorry I'm late. She kissed him on the cheek before taking his hand. Perfect timing. I want you to meet everyone. He greeted several guests with practiced professionalism. Firm handshakes. Confident smile. Respectful conversation. Eventually Chloe guided him toward me. This, she said with a laugh she couldn't quite suppress, is my little sister, Sarah. Austin turned toward me. For a brief second, he wore the same polite smile he'd given everyone else. Then his eyes dropped. Not to my face. To my uniform. Specifically. To the insignia resting above my ribbons. His smile disappeared. His expression froze. I watched his eyes move across every detail. The warfare device. The command insignia. The service ribbons. The identification pins. He wasn't simply looking. He was reading. Years of military training were processing information faster than words ever could. I saw the exact moment recognition hit him. His eyes widened. His breathing stopped. The color drained from his face. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It struck the marble floor and exploded into dozens of glittering pieces. The sharp sound echoed through the ballroom. Every conversation stopped. The orchestra fell silent. Nearly every guest turned toward us. Austin? Chloe frowned. What happened? He didn't answer. His eyes never left mine. For a moment he looked almost horrified. Not because he was afraid. Because he realized exactly what had just happened. He slowly straightened his back. His shoulders squared automatically. Every movement became precise. Professional. Military. Without saying a single word. He snapped to attention. The room grew even quieter. Then, with absolute precision, he raised his right hand to his brow. The salute was flawless. Not casual. Not symbolic. It was the kind of salute reserved for someone you deeply respected. Good evening, Commander Miller. His voice carried through the silent ballroom. It is an honor to see you again, ma'am. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. The silence felt endless. Chloe stared between the two of us in complete confusion. Austin. She forced out a nervous laugh. What are you doing? He didn't lower his salute until I calmly returned it. At ease, Lieutenant. Thank you, ma'am. Only then did he relax. But his posture remained perfectly respectful. Chloe looked at him as if he'd completely lost his mind. Austin. She's my sister. She's just. She laughed awkwardly. Sarah. He slowly turned toward her. The disappointment on his face was impossible to miss. No. He said it quietly. But everyone heard. No, Chloe. That isn't just Sarah. He looked back at me for a moment before continuing. This is Commander Sarah Miller. My superior officer. Several guests exchanged confused looks. My mother blinked rapidly. I don't understand. Austin looked around the ballroom. I suppose that isn't surprising. He took a slow breath. Commander Miller works in one of the most respected operational planning commands in the Navy. Much of what she does isn't public. It can't be. He looked directly at Chloe. You called her a basic sailor. You mocked her uniform. You laughed at her career. His voice became firmer. Do you have any idea who you've been talking to? Chloe swallowed hard. No. You don't. He turned toward the crowd. Last year, my team was conducting a classified mission overseas. The situation changed without warning. We were surrounded. There were no good options. The ballroom remained completely silent. Austin continued. Back at headquarters, Commander Miller redesigned the operation in real time. She identified an extraction route no one else had considered. Every decision she made reached us within minutes. He paused. I've spent years training to survive impossible situations. But that night, my team came home because of her. His voice softened. If Commander Miller hadn't made those decisions, I wouldn't be standing here today. A ripple of shocked whispers swept through the ballroom. Several guests instinctively looked back at me. Not with curiosity anymore. With respect. Real respect. My mother's face had turned completely pale. She looked at me as though she were seeing me for the first time. You. Her voice trembled. You never told us. I smiled gently. You never asked. Those 4 words hit harder than any speech could have. My father, who had been speaking with business partners across the room, hurried over after hearing the commotion. What's going on? Nobody answered immediately. Austin simply looked at him. Sir. Your daughter has dedicated her life to protecting people she'll probably never meet. You should be incredibly proud. My father's expression slowly changed. Confusion. Disbelief. Regret. All within seconds. He looked at my uniform again. Really looked at it this time. Not as clothing. As years of sacrifice. As years of service. As years he had never cared enough to understand. Chloe's confidence completely disappeared. She reached for Austin's arm. Baby. I didn't know. He gently stepped away. I know. I thought she was just. You thought. He interrupted calmly. You never asked. Tears began forming in Chloe's eyes. I was joking. No. Austin replied. You were humiliating someone who has earned more respect than most people ever will. His words landed like stones. One by one. Heavy. Impossible to ignore. Around us, several guests quietly approached. An elderly man extended his hand. Commander. Thank you for your service. A woman beside him nodded. So many of us have family members who served. We're grateful for what you do. Others followed. Simple words. Simple gestures. Nothing extravagant. Yet somehow, they meant more than all the praise my family had ever given Chloe. Because these people weren't impressed by status. They respected sacrifice. My mother finally stepped toward me. There were tears in her eyes now. Sarah. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I looked at her kindly. I know. Can we start over? For a long moment. I simply looked at my family. The people I'd spent years trying to earn approval from. Then I realized something. I didn't need it anymore. Not because I hated them. Because I'd already found something far greater than their acceptance. I'd found purpose. I'd found honor. I'd found people who judged me by my character instead of my paycheck. I smiled softly. There isn't anything to be angry about. I chose my path. And I'd choose it again. I turned toward Austin. Lieutenant. He immediately straightened. Ma'am. Enjoy your evening. Thank you, Commander. I offered him one final nod. Then I adjusted my dress cover beneath my arm, turned, and began walking toward the ballroom doors. No dramatic speech. No celebration. No victory lap. Just quiet dignity. As I stepped outside, the cool ocean breeze rolled across the estate. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Behind me, I could hear muffled voices inside the ballroom. My family trying to explain. Guests still talking. Questions being asked. But none of it mattered anymore. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and drove away beneath the Rhode Island night sky. In my rearview mirror, the lights of the mansion slowly disappeared into the distance. They had spent years believing that success could only be measured by wealth, status, and appearances. That night, they finally learned that the greatest honor isn't wearing an expensive designer gown. Sometimes, it's wearing a uniform that tells a story words never could. And from that day forward, no one in the Miller family ever looked at my uniform the same way again.